This is a good time to talk about my opinion on testing. Everything I'm about to tell you is purely like the doctrine of Brian Holt and not necessarily like the doctrine of the community. So like take that with the whole bag of salt, right? Like just be careful with what I tell you here. Because I'll even say that it's not necessarily like shared by the community at large. I don't do a ton of testing on my React components, right? And the reason being is every company that I've worked at, the UI was constantly in a state of flux, right? We were constantly bringing in new components and taking out other components and just kind of like doing stuff like that willy-nilly. Just because our interfaces were always changing. We were always trying new things. We were doing A/B testing. We were doing all sorts of these things that made it so it was really tough to nail down like this is our UI and it's going to stay that way for a long time. Writing good test cases takes a while. It takes a decent amount of effort to get a decent test case out, right? So with these React components, these like presentational parts of React, we kind of chose for the most part to not test them unless they were consistently breaking, or they were extremely important, or something like that, right? Now what we would test is we would test the business logic behind it, and we would write tons of tests for that, right? So maybe we're not testing like the component that shows like the payment information, right? But we would test the module behind it that tested like that had all the business logic. We would test the hell out of that, right? So that's kind of up to you. But we found when we were writing these tests, these presentational tests, right? That we would write these tests and then they would be used for a month and they would go away, right? When I write a test, I want it to live for a long time and be useful for a long time. So this is purely according to like your particular use case, right? Like if you're writing, like bank code and, banks don't change their UI a whole lot, makes a ton of sense to test everything, right? But if you're doing a ton of A/B testing, you might want to be careful about what you choose to test. So, up to you. Never writing tests, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Well, I mean, sort of.
Maybe it makes sense to throw it out there that Kent C. Dodds,
yep.
Has a course that goes into this stuff like in quite a bit more detail. If you're interested in the different paths you can take with testing,
definitely,
especially with snapshots.
Yeah, no, it's pretty awesome. I've watched pieces of it. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about what find show card returns? It's an array of what?
It's going to return an array of, well, let's see, I can show you from the snapshot. Snap. It's going to be an array of these. It's like they're like stubs, pretty much.
Okay. So if we wanted to validate that the two correct shows were being returned, we could, dot into those and compare titles or something.
The answer is I believe so. I've never tried, so. But that would make sense. Yeah, I think it's an enzyme component, and there is some introspection you can do that say like this is a stub, this is the props being passed in. I think you can validate those props. Cool, any questions on testing? We will come back and we'll do more testing later. And we're gonna break our tests several times before the end of the course. So that's fun.